Good morning, and thank you, Carrie, for taking the time to come speak with us. Today, we're talking with Carrie Shum, who is the Executive Vice President at Hadaway Communications in Washington, D.C., and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to come all the way out to Maryland and visit with us and chat with us about a subject that none of us like to have, but all of us will have at some point in our careers. And of course, I'm talking about having that difficult conversation with clients or bosses. Before we get started, though, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about you and your story and how you got to where you are.
You know, one of my colleagues and I were talking the other day, and he said, nobody grows up and says, I want to be in strategic communications. They all want to be a fireman or, professional sports of some kind. But I feel really lucky to have gotten to the career that I have. Hadaway is a small firm with a really unique focus, which is strategy, science, and storytelling. So rigorously looking at the client's goals, what they're trying to achieve, using cognitive and behavioral science that tells you a lot about how people process information, how the visuals work with the words, how the first thing you tell someone influences everything that comes after that. And then the storytelling, bringing it to life through all of the communications techniques that we have available to us. I feel like this job was meant for me. And I felt that way in my last job. I was at Porter Novelli for 20 years, and I went from being a sort of typical healthcare account person who worked a lot with the research team, as it was called at the time. And then we morphed that team into strategic planning, analytics, and research. And I went over to the dark side. So I, for a while, called myself a recovering account person and worked with all the great researchers and all the data tools we had. But also, my job was a strategic planner, which is to bring that to bear on the client challenge. So really bringing both sides of the firm together. And that led me here. So I was at Porter for 20 years. I've been at Hadaway for 4 months, but it's very different, but also equally fun and interesting.
What a fascinating career you've had. And, it speaks so well to what we try to instill, and that is the importance of research in the work that we do. We know that sometimes clients don't want to pay for that research, but we know how important it is and that we have to figure out ways to make that happen. Well, we're here today to talk about a subject that, as I said earlier, we all fear. And that is when you need to have a conversation with your client, or perhaps worse, I don't know, your boss, and talk to them about any number of things. And I'd like to get into that when you have to have those difficult conversations. If I could ask, in your experience, in fact, what are some of the most common situations that cause you to have that conversation?
There are little issues and big issues, and they can be related. But the big issues are sort of, you've missed the mark, right? You never want to have that terrible moment when a client says, this is not what we were expecting, or not what we wanted, or just somehow just wildly missed whatever it was that was supposed to happen. And the same with your boss. That's probably worse when your boss says, this is not what I expected of you. And then there are the little issues, and sometimes the little issues become big issues, which are, typos, mistakes, budget problems, missed deadlines. And to me, the things that you need to solve both of those are relationships and process. If you have a good relationship with someone, you can work through miscommunications about deliverables, or you can explain why you might need a timeline or why you went over budget. If you don't have a good relationship, those conversations become more difficult. But at the same time, process can help you with those. Yeah, on both sides. A well-run organization, you should never be surprised by something that your boss sits you down to talk about. You should be talking with them all the time, and you should understand what they expect. They should know how well equipped you are to deliver that. And the same with clients. I do feel the days of sort of overly preparing and only showing up to a client when you've got a big, shiny, lockdown presentation, there are fewer of those. There's a lot more rolling up your sleeves together, working together on things, checking in every week, or or often during the course of developing a big deliverable. So again, those things work hand in hand. If you have a bad relationship but a really rigorous process, you're going to have fewer problems. If you've got a really great process and a bad relationship, that can save you from some of those. If everything is good, you're in a perfect world.
Right.
And if everything is bad, things just will probably go from bad to worse.
Do you ever see problems with legal issues or perhaps a difference of opinion about ethics in communication?
Yeah, and those are the really tough ones. Legal issues, a lot of that on the agency side or the PR side can be misunderstanding a process that your client has, or not having a good one on your side. A lot of things with legal releases, photo rights, approvals to record or videotape people, citations. If you're doing research and you're basing something on a literature search, particularly if you have paid advertising where you're making a claim about something, the background on that better be rock solid, and your organization should understand either you have to do it or the client has to do it, but you need to know who it is, because different organizations have different rules on that. But somebody's got to do it, because that's when the problems occur.
Is that both? That's almost like both a legal issue and an ethical issue.
Yeah. And to the point you raised earlier, there's tight budgets, and so sometimes people say, can we use the photo and maybe no one will notice, or can we use the clip of music and maybe no one will notice? They're very good at noticing now. There's lots of tools that all of the big photo houses and recording companies use to track that stuff down.
So how do you have that conversation when the client says, "Oh, it's just one little photo"?
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that ethical issues sneak up on you. One little photo, maybe you do get away with it, but all of a sudden one photo becomes two photos, and sooner or later you are going to get hit with that.
And that's the thing. I couldn't agree with you more, because I've seen that happen so many times, and I think your organization has to have a moral compass, the agency and say, this is how we do it. If the client doesn't have those rules in place, you better have them, and you can make yourself kind of the bad guy to say, this is our standard, and unfortunately, I'm not able to do that.
And even if it's your boss, if you're running the communications department, it seems to me that in many cases we are take up the mantle of being the moral compass of our organization.
Yeah, and you have, it never ends well. Even if your boss tells you to do something, it will surface. And fortunately or unfortunately, often the perhaps lower tier person will be the one who gets blamed for it. Yeah. And so again, that goes back to HR process in the organization. If your boss is telling you to do something that is either illegal or unethical or both, you better have a strong HR team that you can go to bring that up, because I have seen it happen. The worst case I've ever heard of was we were working with a big agency team, multi-agency team, and there was a script. The creative director wanted a script change in something we were filming, and the account person said okay, even though there was a very rigorous process in hand that any script changes had to be approved by the client. And she forged the client's signature. So she forged the client's signature on the approval sheet, because there was studio time and deadlines, and we just had to get it done. And why is it going to really matter anyway? And that script change ended up running afoul of an FCC issue. And when it came back to how did it get approved, and that woman lost her job, her agency lost the account. It didn't happen immediately, but 6-8 months later, an enormous cascade happened. We, the PR professional, need to have that moral compass, and of course we have our public relations society, our IABC, the Business Communicators Organization Association. Each have our ethical codes that we
should know
Yep.
and should follow. When you see this happening, and you can see the train wreck down the road, even if it's just a little thing today, you can see the train wreck. How do you start that conversation with the client?
Yeah. And I think ultimately they will respect you for having it, as difficult as it may be. Because people do have a pretty good gut check usually. If someone's trying to do something that they know secretly is probably not great, somebody else coming to them is going to help surface it. And it may not be pleasant in the moment. And that's where, again, make sure you've discussed it internally with your organization to say, the client's asked me to do this, or we're contemplating doing this, and I'm feeling uneasy about it. Get advice from whoever else you're working with. Ideally go in with more than just you, having the combined force or united front from everybody that client sees at your agency to say, we are uncomfortable with this and here's why.
Yeah, I think that having the data, bringing the data with you to the conversation, I think is really helpful. And I love the idea of going in with someone else. And earlier you had mentioned the importance of having the relationship. That of course we're in the relationship business, and one of the things that I think we need to do is not only establish relationship with the publics we're trying to talk to, but with our clients and bosses. There's that relationship too.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that, I think maybe it makes it a little bit easier to close the door and sit down and say, hey boss, I think we got a problem.
Absolutely. And those are hard, right? Because it is business, and different people have different lines of how much they want to be friends with clients and coworkers, and other people have different lines. But there's also data there is actually data that says the reason people hire firms or people is because they want to work with them. That is the number one reason. Trumps creative abilities or technical expertise. If you ask people who hire professional communication support, the reason they choose one person or firm over another is because they want to work with them. And so that's about relationships.
It is.
And there are lots of great books that tell you how to build those relationships. But it is, to me, I always think, treat them like a person, which sounds absurdly straightforward. But don't just launch into your agenda on a conference call. Ask them about their weekend. Mention something that they enjoy. Those are not time wasters. Those are shared values and shared moments that say, this isn't just a transaction, this is a relationship.
What a great point. That's a fabulous point.
Yeah, and
I do that. It's funny because I do that, and I'm not even thinking about it. I never start an email right into the business. I would say, how was your week, or how was your weekend? How are you doing? Hope this note finds you well. That sort of thing, and then the next paragraph.
And that was my first boss in PR had her own firm, and she was a very tough lady, but she taught me all of that stuff. I remember once we came back from a meeting in New York, and we'd been in New York all day, flew back, went straight to the office. We're working on a bunch of things. I had to get them to the client. This was in the days of fax machines. So I wrote my cover fax. It was like, Dear Dana, as we discussed this afternoon, here's the document. And she came in my office and she said, don't do that again. We just had lunch with her. We spent the day with her. You should have said, it was so great to sit down with you today and work through all these issues. I hope you're having a good evening. We've gotten make it clear you're not just checking a box to try to get home after a very long day. And it still stuck with me. That was a very long time ago that I had that conversation, as evidenced by the fact that I have not touched a fax machine in probably over a decade. And it does help. And I think candor helps. If you make a mistake, don't try to hide it, because that, as they always say, it's not the lie, it's the cover-up. So don't go into the cover-up. Immediately disclose whatever happened, and that again builds trust. If you say, there's a huge typo on page 7 of this document, and I'm so sorry I sent it to your board. What is the best way to address this? Do you want to send another? Then you work through the solution with your client. Have options. I could redo it and resend it and apologize. We could, have a different document in the room and just give people a hard copy to work. Whatever is going on to make it clear that you know it, you've thought through what could happen, what should happen, and you work through a solution.
And the interesting thing is that clients make mistakes too. And when you have that relationship with the client, you can walk in, close the door, and say, hey, I think you might have made a mistake or overstepped a bound or this, and have that honest conversation person to person, right?
Well, and I think, the ethical stuff starts with, do you want to work on this client's business? And I have seen cases where people talk themselves into why it's okay to work on something that they don't really feel is what they want to work on. And again, sometimes that does not work out well. And you then find yourself kind of making another another decision and another decision, and all of a sudden you're in some murky waters. And I just don't, my gut says that never works out well. I've never seen that work out well. When you talk yourself into the first step, it's probably not going to end where you want. And have the courage, I use the word courage a lot these days, have the courage to say, even though this is a really big account that we could use the money, we're all in business, this is not who we are as a company. And as nice as it would be to have all this revenue coming in, we don't want to compromise what makes us who we are.
That's a difficult decision to make, but one that we have to have the strength, I think, to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to you talked about murky waters, and I wanted to kind of, if I could just shift just a little bit, as the field of public relations converges into becoming strategic communication involving many aspects of communication across the whole organization, we find ourselves engaging in even closer relationships with the marketing teams and the advertising teams within the organization. When we integrate PR into marketing activities, I think we do step into some murky waters sometimes. What are your boundaries, or how do you decide when we're overstepping and we're moving into a marketing and we're leaving the relationship building business and getting involved in the transactional business of marketing? How do you deal with that? Or I guess one question is, again, you talk about something sneaking up on you. That will sneak up on you. How do you deal with that? When do you make that decision to pull back and say, well, we're PR, or we're all part of the same strategic communication team, and we certainly have a responsibility in marketing communications, but we have to remember that for us, it's not just the transaction, it's also the overall relationship.
And it can be really fun, and it can really push you as a PR person, or it can be really frustrating. And I think the best teams like that, where you're really working on integrated with maybe the digital firm, the ad agency, the direct mail firm, whoever may be on the team, is when everyone jointly agrees on the strategy and the sort of big ideas, and you're all involved in that. What doesn't often work well is when one firm dictates what everyone else does, because ad people may be wonderful at being ad people, but most of them don't know what PR is. Most people don't know what PR is, and they say, can't you just go promote this tagline that we've come up with? Why isn't that a news story? You get those kind of conversations, which are not fun. That's when it works really well. But I do think we in PR have a job to do of better explaining what PR is today, because it's not just press releases and pitching media, and how it works well with other people. And the best ways it works well is when it's not, I worked on P&G for a long time, and my colleague who I work with, she would always say, it's not matching luggage. It's not just repeating the phrase that's in the ad. It's taking the essence of that and working with the trusted advisors and the interesting channels and the unique ideas that bring that same idea to life in ways that are right for earned media or events or influencer marketing or whatever it may be. but it's hard. And people will say, can't you just buy that? And you can buy some stuff. And I do think where I see it, a lot of PR people default to, we'll just buy it. We'll do an advertorial, not pitch the media team. We'll do sponsored content, not try to get into that, news website. And those tools can be really great. They can be really helpful. You can often, use them, get a little bump that drives people back to the earned media or whatever it may be. Paid search can be a fabulous tool to add to a PR campaign, to just escalate your stuff into the people who will find it interesting. Not to be a pest about it, but to sharpen the focus. But I do think it goes back to, people don't know what PR skills are, and they default to those things. And the other people on the integrated marketing team, you're speaking their language, so they're not going to push back on you. So I think it's hard, but important, and also try to speak the same language. The big language in marketing is things like ROI, and can you speak the language of ROI in a way that shows the value of PR in that language? And that's hard because we don't have a great measurement reporting language in PR.
That's correct. It's because we're not transactional or relationship based.
So I think, and I do have a base of knowledge, and I do trot this out when I don't have the ROI data. But whenever I've actually done a marketing mix model, which is the gold standard and ROI of different marketing elements of a program, PR generally delivers, and it can deliver more than any other technique, and it generally delivers sort of orders of magnitude more than any other technique. And partially that's because the spend is less. So true ROI is how much money did you put against it, and then what was the result. But that gives me confidence to say, I know it works. And we also know from lots of other research, people trust friends and family far more than any form of media, and certainly any form of social media. And word of mouth is the number one reason people do things. They heard about it from their mom and then their neighbor, and then they saw somebody at the pool who also said it, and all of a sudden you think, I should try that or do that or read that.
Fantastic insight. Thank you so much. I got a quick question about when you run into a boss or a client that thinks they're great in front of the media, and they just want to, have news conferences or interviews, and you're not so sure about their talent in answering questions or being able to, block and bridge. And so how do you have that conversation with your client? And then what do you do about it?
Yes, this is an important conversation. I worked in healthcare, so there are lots of doctors who are eminent, and they present a lot, and they speak at conferences a lot, and they talk with colleagues a lot, and they don't know why this would be any different. And so they don't, and they're busy, really busy, and they don't want to make time for it. And there's a couple things that you can do. One thing that we actually did with it, I'm thinking of a recent client, was make it routine. So we would go out to where they were, and just every quarter, there was a day of media training. And so it became a thing that most people were, the agency's coming out, we're going to bring in the media trainer, just a refresher, and sometimes it was scheduled around a big event or interview we knew was coming, but just putting it on the books so that it didn't become as big a thing. And then we would work with our client to get the people who really needed it to make it that they did it and try it.
Make it almost like a game, or a
just,
fun thing.
And part of the thing of, we just want you to be better at this. It's very effective, but it's very risky. I'm thinking of the same client. One of the reasons we started doing that is they had a senior executive who didn't want to do it. She didn't want presentation. It was presentation and media training. And then she spoke at a major conference and saw the video. And she came to us and said, oh my God, I look awful. I'm all crouched over. I wasn't speaking clearly now. And so that was a very big thing on her part, to acknowledge to her communications lead to say, you were right. I was wrong. So showing people video of themselves and understanding why this can help, and positioning, it's not a negative. It's a skill that you have not learned yet, and it is a skill. That can work, but it is risky.
Well, it's so much better when they recognize it themselves.
Yeah, that was the perfect scenario
exactly.
where we really tried hard, and then she didn't do it, and then she saw herself and was.
Now, did you tape her, or was she taped by some other? The event
was live streamed, and then they, kept the video up on the website of this major event, and she was a keynote at this big event, and was not happy with how she came off.
Well, good for her that she came to you.
And I do think working one-on-one with them, showing them the difference between what they want to say and what they currently are saying. I do think another thing we've done a lot is testing the messages. We were working with a very senior person, and he was coming in new to an organization. He had a vision for his work, really charismatic, wonderful guy. Nobody understood what his vision was. He delivered it very well, but nobody understood what it was. And we were in the act of testing a lot of messaging for the organization as a whole. So we tested that. And then we had data to say, nobody understands what you mean by this. These are some better ways you could say it. And then we helped him feel natural, because the language he was using felt very natural to him. How to make this new language that he didn't come up with feels natural. And that was, again, a moment where, well, let's bring in some help to help you internalize this.
It's fascinating. And again, it's the data that convinced him that he needed the help.
Yeah. So that can really help. I do think making it part of professional development for people at agencies or in the field. Very few people are naturally wonderful presenters. It's a gift if you have it. It's a skill you can learn if you don't have it. And making it part of a progression path for people, you're going to have to present to clients. You're going to ideally be an expert in something that you do and want to go speak to people or get taped for a podcast. and just trying to make it part of people's. The worst time to coach anybody on anything, though, is after you're rehearsing right before you actually do it. And that's when most people intervene, because you might have been working with someone for a day on a big presentation, and you should really stop fidgeting when you go up there. Is a really terrible thing to say to someone right before they go on stage.
I so identify. Actually, people get surprised with me because I generally talk okay in front of an audience. Inside, I'm jello. I'm scared to death, but my wife tells me that I hide it pretty well.
I would never have guessed.
Oh, see. If we could switch gears a little bit one more time. You're a senior leader at Hadaway Communications, and you work with your subordinate senior account executives, and they work with account executives, if I have the hierarchy right. She's nodding yes. When or how do you decide or determine when you need to get involved? What are the signs that you're looking at that says, you know what, I need to step in here?
With a client situation,
yes,
back to our difficult conversations.
That's correct. That's back to the difficult conversation.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think, again, it goes back to process and how you structure your teams and making sure that even if it's a smaller account that might be being led by, someone who's more like a senior associate level person, that we always have what we call a strategic advisor. So there's no account in our firm that doesn't have somebody at the upper echelons checking in regularly with the team. And you can tell sometimes with the staff get agitated. When they're really stressed, it's always good to go in and say, what's on your mind? I feel like something's happening on this account that maybe isn't great.
Do you sense that first through their physical reactions and then through report? Does it work its way into actual reports?
We have check-ins or we have regular staff meetings, and if someone doesn't want to talk about their account, people sort of, you can always tell. There's a great development book. You should never make fun of your clients. If you're making fun of your clients, it's a sign of something wrong in the relationship. And so when you start people being sort of catty about their clients, as much as they may love the work, but when they're sort of blowing off steam that way, you can sense that kind of thing. And just again, I know I sound like a broken record. Going back to the process, where are we in the work plan? Okay, that's the same update you've given me for the last 3 weeks. So what's going on there? Or how are you feeling about the timeline? Are there things going on? So having those things of these are the non-negotiables. This is our deadline. This is what we're supposed to deliver by that deadline. This is the way we're going to get there. And sometimes it can be internal. It can be the people on the team internally are not getting along, and that's leading to client problems because of something that has nothing to do with the client and everything to do with the way our team is being managed. And those are really important for someone inside the firm because you've got to sort that early, and or else it's going to, again, snowball and get worse. So talk, it again goes back to what's your relationship on your team. Building teams, putting the right people together on the right kinds of work is an art, and it should feel like an art. People are people. You are not widgets at a factory, and we're going to plug in this many senior account executives to complete this project. We're going to have the right ones who have the skills and the expertise and a relationship with somebody else on the team and with the client or want to learn about this field. You should treat your people as individuals and match them with projects that are going to help them be better at what they do.
And then, so we talked a little bit about the internal dynamics of the team. What if the problem is the relationship of the team to the client?
Yeah, and that can be problematic because you've got to replace your team, and depending how much work you have in your organization, what other work do those people have to do? But it also is part of account planning. No one, in my firm belief, especially at an agency, nobody should work on one client exclusively. That's the reason you're at an agency often, is to get some variety. And it's also, to be a little more cold-blooded capitalist, it's not great for an agency if the entire relationship on a big client is with one person, not with a broader team of people. But it can be easy. Oh, they love Diana. Let's just keep her in the business, and we'll put some other people around her, but she's really going to be the linchpin of this thing. But it can be hard. And again, that goes back to no one should ever be an island. So you have somebody who may be the core day-to-day, but the more senior person should be checking in. At our agency, the owner whose name is on the door checks in with people. He's a strategic advisor on lots of our clients because they come to us for a distinct reason, which is his vision and his structure and the way he thinks of communication. It all sounds really easy and seamless, and in reality, it can get messy and things happen that probably shouldn't happen. And that's where your process comes in. Were you really clear about your scope of work?
I was just going to ask you about the process.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how does this conversation unfold?
Yeah, well, we have a kickoff meeting. You should always have a kickoff meeting with a client that is sort of a business meeting, which is, is the scope right? Do you still want what we thought you wanted, and how far away are we? And really being crystal clear in writing what you're doing, by when, to what end, and what does it consist of? I always ask, what do you like and what do you hate? Are there words that just are like nails on a chalkboard to you that you don't want to see?
And you actually ask the client this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because especially in fields like healthcare or technical fields, there may be jargon that gets overused or jargon that really means something specific to them that they like to see. What's their preferred way of communication? Some people are email people. Some people are text people. Some people are phone call people. Some people are face-to-face people. When you say weekly check-in, what do you mean by that? And do you want an agenda? How far in advance? Just those little things that can add up and be super annoying if you didn't clarify it from the beginning. And then you've got your ground rules, and then you've got your process of this is how we work with this client, and this is how it might be different or the same to how we work with somebody else. And then you've got guardrails, and you say, I'm really sorry, and you can have your own guardrails. I think that's actually really important. Somebody really smart at Porter Novelli said to me very early on, we are in a client service business. We are not in a client servitude business. And he meant by that is they are hiring us for expertise and opinions and points of view and smart thinking. So your job is not just to say yes Or how high do you want me to jump? And sometimes that is, especially in today's environment, guardrails on when you want to talk to a client and when you don't want to talk to a client. And it may be okay with you to have a client email you at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, and it may be completely beyond the pale. But if you never said that to them, they don't know. And so that's the thing, too, to say, especially a lot of people work shifted hours. People may come in early and leave early, may come in late and leave late, may have a day where they're working remotely or not working. Let the client know that. That's perfectly normal and acceptable in today's business world that you have those kind of things. But if they don't know, they don't know. And so if you take every Thursday off and they need something on a Thursday and they can't find you, then you're going to have a conflict. But if they know and they are either can wait till Friday or thought of it Wednesday when they could still get hold of you, or reach out to you very apologetically and understanding that you may not immediately get back to them, you have a very different relationship.
And it goes the other way.
Yeah.
You need to know what your clients'
Exactly.
guardrails are, too.
Yeah, because there are people who work all the time and there are people who don't work all the time. And again, if you're trying to meet a deadline and, oh, it's great, I'll send it to this person at 7 o'clock at night, that's the deadline. It's not the deadline if she leaves at 5 to go do whatever she'd like to do in her evenings. Right. Her deadline was 5 o'clock, so...
And if you're going to have a difficult conversation, you know, first of all, you don't want to violate the guardrails. That's for sure. If you're going to have a difficult conversation about an ethical issue or even a legal issue, which would be, I'm not sure which is worse, but neither is good.
Yeah, and you know, there are particularly big complex organizations. Sometimes the client doesn't know, and they don't even think of it. So it's actually a way that you can be really resourceful to your client to say, what's your clearance process for photography or video? Or they often don't know. Or partnerships. This comes up a lot in PR, actually. What is a partner? You know, if you're going to work with a nonprofit group on an issue, or you're going to work with a media partner not pitching media, but somehow use them as a partner. Lots of organizations have very, very distinct categories of where they put people like that, and there are rules depending on the category. And if you assume that you've got one, you're working under one set of rules, but the legal people back at the home base think you're working another, that's where you're in a problem. But if you ask the question early, you seem really, really smart to your client. And can get that clarity early before it impacts your deadlines and your budgets and all that kind of things. We're working with a healthcare company doing a big, primarily PR survey, but it was definitely something to release to media and be sort of more research for ink. But they thought of it as a market research survey, and so we were halfway done and legal put a screaming halt on it, and we couldn't do it we couldn't field it the way we wanted to field it. We had to do a competitive bid. It became a whole thing. Fortunately, we pulled it off and got everything done by the timeline, but if we had asked, well, we did, and this was one, thank goodness, we did ask and got clearance that it wasn't considered market research, it was considered media, and it was okay, and then a different lawyer came in 3 months later and said, no, I don't agree, it has to go back. But fortunately, we had done our due diligence and asked the right clients because we knew that sometimes happened.
But even that speaks to the relationship, because if the client knows that you've done it, and at least they don't blame you, right?
Yeah, and then we were,
Right.
And I will say she was a wonderful client, and we were in the trenches together, trying to sort and solve and figure out how can we get this done. So,
Carrie, I can't thank you enough. What wonderful stories you've told us.
Stories only PR people would love,
Indeed.
right? We've all been there.
Indeed. And sharing your insight and your experience with us. I know it's going to make us better professionals when we get out there. And I truly, truly appreciate you coming by and stopping by and chatting with us today.
Well, it's very nice to see you. It's a great way to spend a Friday morning here in the studio.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much.